For decades, Camp Shane promised dramatic weight loss for kids and teens.
But behind the scenes, there was tax fraud, disordered eating, neglect, abuse, and more.
We're doing a recap of Camp Shame on this episode of So Much Crime,
So Little Time. Hey, I was outside for a walk yesterday, and I saw somebody walking down the street, and they were wearing these maroon sweatpants, and they had this maroon shirt on. And when I got closer, I realized that shirt was one of our shirts. It was a So Much Crime, So Little Time t-shirt. Honestly, everybody was looking. Everyone was like, that guy's got something going on. That is an awesome outfit. That is a great shirt. Tell me more about that podcast. And he was just loving it. He was having the time of his life, telling everybody all about being a fashion icon and about our show. And people were saying, how do I get a shirt like that? I want to dress just like you. And he said, and then he told me about this because I of course went up to him and talked to him for a bit. He said, everybody, I just tell them, go to patreon.com/so-much-crime, so little time. You too can get one of our awesome maroon t-shirts or a hat. But honestly, the shirt really pops. People love it. People keep asking about it. Only way to get it, go to patreon.com/so-much-crime, so little time. Thank you.
Welcome to So Much Crime, So Little Time. I'm Dee.
And I'm Jeff. And before we start, just a quick warning.
Oh, jeepers, there's a warning needed here.
This episode is going to have spoilers for Camp Shame. We're going to discuss the whole series.
If you haven't listened yet, check out our preview episode on this show. It's the one before this one in your feed.
You'll also find a link for Camp Shame in our show notes.
Let's just remind ourselves where we are and a little bit about this podcast in general. So this was released in the summer 2025. The host is Kelsey Snelling. It's got 8 episodes, each about 45 minutes each. Interesting thing about the host here is that she notes that she actually worked in Camp Shane with an N, as a counsellor in 2011. So we get a really unique perspective given how close she was to the camp and her own personal experiences. But Jeff, tell us a little bit more about the story.
Yeah, so in the first episode, we were introduced to Camp Shane. That's Shane with an N. This was a weight loss camp for kids that opened back in 1968. It promised pretty significant results and sometimes seemed to get them. Kids were losing as much as 35 pounds in 8 weeks at the camp. We heard from a bunch of different people who had been campers at different times throughout the camp's history. We also heard some real positive things about how this place was a real sanctuary for acceptance. But on the flip side of that, there were some pretty brutal calorie restrictions, very severe. And we learned about some kids who were finding very creative ways to sneak in food to get the calories that they really needed. And at the end of that first episode, we heard that in 2021, the camp very suddenly closed. But at the end of that episode, we really didn't know why. So we listened to 7 more episodes. We learned why. We learned a lot of whys. And yeah, so let's talk about Camp Shame.
Yeah. You know, let's start off about what I want to say from a positive note about this podcast, I think. To me, it really felt like people focused, but also impact focused. So, you know, we often talk with our true crime recaps about podcasts that kept the victim at front and center, or the victims front and center, or who focus more on kind of the perpetrator or the villain, or we feel like the wrong thing. And what I liked here is throughout each episode, they spoke about the villains in the story, but without making the story about them. They always came back to the impact it had on all of the people. There was so many people, so many children, but people like, you know, workers, adults as well, who could see the breaking down of this. Like, you even heard about a family breakdown at the heart of it all. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It felt like really interesting how they managed to do that in 8 episodes. Like, tell so much of a story that spanned across what, 7 decades?
50 something years.
Oh, 5 decades? Good.
Well, more than 50 years, right? Because
68
to 20.
Yeah.
68 to
19.
2021.
To 21.
Technically
yeah.
7 different decades, but
Yeah.
53,
I
54
knew
years.
I got 7 correct. So 7 decades, but then we're also like really bringing in those kind of systematic and societal failures that led to this and continue to allow this to happen. So it just like, it did a lot for the story. And I don't feel like we lost the people aspect. So I feel like that is a big win for this podcast.
Yeah. I mean, I would say right from the start, I thought this was an incredibly well-researched, incredibly thorough and detailed podcast, where the other thing that we often say about some podcasts that are a little bit on the longer side, I mean, long is relative, but I feel like this is a little bit longer than some of the ones we've been doing lately. It didn't feel like it was stretching out too thin of a story over too long of a time, because I feel like every time I felt like we were just learning about a camper or a counselor or an era in its history, it would pivot to something else. And that something else was significantly different. Like, it wasn't the same story over and over again, like
No.
these different campers. One thing I wanted to say, I listened to a lot of this while I was either driving or like couldn't take notes. I was riding my bike or whatever. Like, I was just in a place where I couldn't take notes. And so I didn't take a lot of notes initially, but the transcripts for this are available on the iHeart site. They're actually available all over the internet. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go to AI and ask AI to write me summaries of the episodes. And then I was like, wait, it's not really including all the different people. So I'm going to ask it to basically give me a list of all the people. And then I had to try to organize it by campers and counselors. And the funny thing is, I asked it several different ways, and it kept leaving out several of the people who I really like wanted to remember. Okay, this person, and I want to see their story summarized, because there were so many people, and it just like it wasn't able to do that well. But I think like this is the type of podcast where I feel like you could listen to it a couple of times and pick up different things that you missed the first time, just because there's so much depth to it. I mean, it's covering over 50 years across 7 decades, as you noted. This is one of those things too where I feel like if I'm Kelsey, the host, how overwhelming must that research have been? Like, how I just imagine
she definitely
her
had to have had a pin board.
Yeah, how does she organize all of these people, all of these eras, all the campers, the counselors, the parents, I mean, she had experts too, right? It was just a wall with like little index cards and red string all over it. I'm fascinated to hear how she kept it straight. Can I ask you a question about kind of related to that? So I feel like the other thing that I noticed was, as it kept going on, we kept getting answers to things we wondered about in our preview, or things that at the end of our preview we said, like, what do we kind of hope happens? And both, I think the things we hoped happened and the things we feared would happen, all of it happened, good and bad, right?
Yeah.
Like, the most significant thing that jumped out at me first was the story of like, it seemed like this camp was founded by a woman who really had good intentions.
Yeah, it's so frustrating, isn't it, to see that like Selma did have good intentions, and like I felt like that was something that kept coming up. We heard about it throughout a few different episodes, how it was, no, she really did, like her idea was to help. And even like in terms, what I liked hearing about, I suppose, was like in terms, it wasn't even just like, oh, let's help, people in larger bodies like get slimmer. Part of it was like, oh, she wanted to make it co-ed because, obviously back then she was thinking very much like from like a heterosexual situation, but how, like, if it's co-ed, then people who maybe don't experience or children who maybe don't experience crushes and like the ability to be openly like crushing on someone or have your first kiss or whatever, that this is all kind of a safe environment. I thought that was really, really nice to kind of hear, like, how it was kind of more holistic than let's get them in and let's get them thin. It was really focused on trying to give everyone a space to feel accepted, and also, in her mind, I think it was noted, like, better themselves. And obviously this is an audio platform. I am obviously with my voice and with my hands, as Jeff can confirm. When I'm saying better, I feel like that was like the inference to what Selma would have thought at the time.
Yeah.
To make their bodies thinner. Obviously we know like that thinner isn't better, but it's frustrating to like then hear how her son started, I suppose, his
David,
manipulation of people by manipulating his mother and his parents into like giving him the business. And then like take it over, but with none of the care that Selma had for that more holistic side and for the children, and like empathy for growing up in a society maybe where the children that she's hoping to bring into the camp don't feel like they can exist, don't feel desirable from a friendship point of view or like a crush point of view, and don't feel like they can have the same experiences in their teenage years as other people. And I think, you know, he took all of the most callous and cold parts of what it seemed like Selma was trying to create and ran with them. And that's tough. Like, that must be really tough as a mother for Selma to have realized as he started to do that.
Yeah. And I mean, to your earlier point, I felt like we got enough of the Selma and David story without them being like moving to the center. And I would even say like some of the more bonkers stuff that Selma did, and some of it was pretty wild. You could see the intentions there. Like, I think the craziest story of her was the story of that counselor, the single mom who came up with her daughter, and then she was on like a walking trip to town. Well, yeah, but later in that story where she's out with campers off site and one gets hurt and she takes the girl in her car, and then she like wakes up the next morning and Selma's like in her room, like Selma had brought a chair in and is like waiting for her to wake up. And it's a terrifying story, but also like from Selma's perspective, you can't have a counselor put a kid in a car. Like that opens up a different liability, and it, like, I get it. Like, I get where she's coming from. Her methods, don't agree with, but several of her methods, I don't stand up. But like,
and I think that's even so for like her parenting. Like, I mean, no parent is perfect, and often like every parent is just trying to do their best. But you know how she always felt like her brother was put on a pedestal by her parents. So she did kind of the exact opposite for David. And then here we are. David like starts by manipulating him her and her husband, and then moves on to manipulating parents, kids, campers, counselors, like workers. It just, and then obviously the legal system like just manages to like worm his way through that and not have to worry about any sort of consequences.
You know what's interesting about that? I was listening to a lot of this. I would say through, I don't know how many episodes, 4 or 5 or 6 episodes. And we heard about David and like the tax evasion thing. And like, that's a crime. And we heard about a lot of, technically. We heard about a lot of sort of like cruel behavior, unethical behavior, like things that or just like wrong things that happened. But for a lot of this podcast, I was thinking like, okay, what is this true crime? Like, what is the crime here? And by the end of it, we get several very direct crimes.
Yeah, Jesus.
But not for the first, I feel like, I don't know, 5 or 6 episodes, other than the tax evasion thing. Like, it's mostly just like a bad camp that does some bad things, but also does some really good things for the kids going there. But before maybe that pivot, it's funny because I was telling people about it as I was listening to them. Like, yeah, like surprisingly, there's no like, it's not like a story about kids getting abused, although then it was. But it kind of withheld that, and I think it withheld some things in some interesting ways. That's one thing I want to ask about. Like, maybe I'm misremembering this, but I feel like Kelsey, our host, sort of like dropped that she was a counselor in like episode 5. And I don't think we knew that from the beginning. Did we know that?
Oh, I think she said at the beginning.
Okay, well, if she did, then I think my note is it turned into a different type of structure and narrative once it became a story. Like that episode more about her experience, I thought was one of those like hard pivots to something very different, right? Because it became like a first person accounting. Like obviously she's talking about some real serious struggles that she went through and the other counselors went through. But prior to that, it was more of like a journalistic kind of approach of I'm the sort of objective narrator.
And she was
present.
Yeah, but like I felt like in the first few episodes, it was like the history of it. Like we would hear about like the origin of the small, medium, and large sizing, which I don't know. Did
Oh my
you know
gosh,
that?
did you know that?
No.
No, it's from the Civil War.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting. And like even just like Selma's life story and like her family and how that all like played out and like all of that aspect I think was fascinating. It felt like she introduced her as a camper. Maybe if there's a timeline, the before she introduced her is the before she got there. Because throughout the 8 episodes, it's getting closer and closer to 2021. So I feel like we heard, like if we had heard about that at the start, it's like, okay, so are you in yet? Are you in yet? Like we never had to like think about that. Like I feel like we found it out at the right time.
I'm trying to think of another story where our host and sort of the investigator becomes a part of the story that kind of late, like in the back half of the story, and then it becomes a very like there are moments where it's very personal about her.
But I think we've heard this before. It's just not maybe that structure. Like when you think of Lords of Death, Thrasher Banks, who was the host. Don't shake your head at me. You don't know what I'm going to say.
Okay, sure. Sorry.
Thrasher Banks is the host, and we know from the get-go that he like found this box and he's talking to his mother about it. But he just told the story in a different way. He introduced that straight off. That was the hook. Like that was the thing of like, this story is different because it's me and my mom that I'm talking about. Whereas the hook with Camp Shame wasn't to do with Kelsey having been there. Kelsey having been there was such a small amount of time in this insane journey through a camp and the history of a camp where so many different things happened. So if she said at the start that she had been, like if she introduces that too quickly, it feels like it maybe thwarts your like feeling on it.
I think that's right, but I think it's interesting to contrast it with Lords of Death because you're right. Like the whole conceit there is, this is Thrasher's like childhood. This is his mom. This is the world he kind of grew up in.
But so much of the story is told before he would have like entered it as such, or like been cognizant that he had entered it.
But actually, I agree with your point. I think that if she had started by saying, this is a story about me having been a counselor at this camp, and then I'm going to jump back in time and bring us up to my moment, that as like a framing device, it would have sort of colored the whole thing. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have. But I think the way she does it, and this is, I think, maybe a factor of how many people she got to participate in this from so many different parts of the story, by the time it becomes her story, like I'm so already kind of invested and deep into it that it's a different version of this where it's really just her story about her time, her era, her friends, her sister. Would have been very personal.
Like she moves from like the narrator to the focus of the story nearly. But then she moves out again.
She does. It's a really unusual thing to do.
Yeah, good point.
I think it's really interesting. It's very different. I think the effect it had on me as a listener was I was fully bought into kind of her role as presenter, and then suddenly I'm learning all these things about her, like, you know, that chocolate ice cream sundae that she eats, and like the binging and purging and like all of that stuff, and just like oh my god, the blueberry pie and watermelon eating contest thing, like some just kind of horrific stuff where she's there, like she's telling her story. It's like, okay, I believed. It's not that I'm going to come in and not believe people, but like I believed all of these people telling their story. And then when I hear the person who's interviewing them also has her own story, her own trauma from this, it takes a very powerful story and it just makes it like something else and a different kind of type of powerful.
I think it adds depth to the story, definitely. It moves it from like oh my god, did I do something in less words? That's wow. Winning at life. That was like my goal for the year, is to do that at one point. I'm sure I'll make up for it in like a rant in 5 minutes or something. But yeah, I feel like it definitely added depth to the story. But in a way that didn't take over and be like, hey, it's the Kelsey show and it's me, I know it all kind of a thing, which I think we've seen before with other podcasts, where you can feel like one person is like trying to be the center of it and you're like, Mm.
A criticism that I have of this, or it was developing my brain, was I felt like she was being at times, her part of the story before it was her story, maybe overly dramatic, or like an example would be some of the things that we heard about. It must have been episode 4 or so. It was right before she talked about her own experience as a counselor, but where she was talking about some of the things with counselors getting fired before they get paid. Like the whole pay system is messed up, where they get their payment for the summer in 2 increments, but if they get fired or leave right before one of the paydays, they basically just don't get paid. And it's not like, how is that legal? First of all, how do you and I guess that's just the contract terms. You sign the contract, you agree to that, so I guess you're on those terms. But super shady. But my point is, it wasn't clear. It felt to me a little bit like she was conflating something very unethical and immoral with something that we need to call the police. And this is this person should be locked up and this camp should be shut down over this. And while I think probably it should have been, I don't know that's really legally true.
Mm.
And that's the kind of thing where once she became a character in the story, it sort of justified, I feel some of that things that felt maybe overly dramatic on her part. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you are embedded in this situation, you're going to have more of an emotional and maybe dramatic response to it than someone who's got the space to see the full picture and to be calmer about it. I think that's just natural. It also feels very teenage counselor-esque to be oh my goodness, this has never happened in any other situation. And not to dismiss what happened at Camp Shane, fuck's sake. But it feels not to dismiss all of the full picture, but I think what makes this a true crime podcast is all of the parts together. All of the different facets. Obviously, particularly the abuse, the neglect. Each of that on its own is crime, but what makes it a true crime podcast is all of it together. At least a true crime podcast series is all of it together. And I think when you are so in it as a teenager, you don't have the experience to know that each parts of these have happened multiple times in different situations. And while
That's
obviously the abuse and the neglect is one, they're things that of course, and the falsifying that there's going to be medical professionals on site. That's all absolutely outrageous. But there were some parts that she was we should call the cops to, that you're nah, I think this is just...
Yeah.
It's not that, as big as that, but all of it together. I think when you're so close to it, it's really hard to see. What do they say? It's hard to see the wood for the trees?
Forest for the trees.
You can also say wood.
Yeah, actually, you saying that made me think of another angle on this, because I think I agree with that. I
love when you say I think I agree with that. I'm not 100% sure. We'll just go with think, just so I can go back on myself again.
If she had started with some of the things we hear about at the very end, the last couple of years of the camp, where it's sort of Lord of the Flies, there's no adults, the actual sexual abuse story that we hear about, some of the most sort of horrific elements, I think it would have felt different. I think it would have felt overly salacious, or overly, it would have been very strange to then jump back and spend so much time talking about sort of, I guess, lesser offenses. That's I don't want to qualify it that way. That's not really, can't really compare it things like this. But I think the way it was structured, and maybe this is just the way it happened. I kind of walked away feeling this is the way it happened over the decades. Was it just sort of built and built and built and got worse and worse and worse?
Yeah.
And so by the time we got to that last couple of years in Connecticut, where it was just seemed like the camp was in complete disarray, that became more believable because we saw the progression over the years. We saw the leadership, David, I guess, focusing more and more on just making money, being more and more exploiting more and more the counselors, the parents, the campers.
Or giving less shits and trying to cover his tracks. He's oh, well, I've been getting away with this for years. That's what it felt like every summer. It was I care less. So things are just being chipped away.
One thing I wish do we know? So we don't know. He walks away from this without consequence.
From this podcast, it seems.
He made his money. No one took his money away. He's not in jail.
He paid off anyone that got injured or needed to like sue.
He didn't participate in this podcast. And I appreciate that was a note at the end of each episode that she really tried to get him to participate. Yeah, it's a real bummer. Like, he got away with this for decades. Like, he took it over the 90s. It closed in 2021. So for what, 30 or somewhere in the ballpark of 30 years, he just milked this. So many kids, so many adults too. But also, like, one of the things that I thought was really like one of the most powerful moments for me
was I know what you're gonna say.
The mom of Seth's mom. So he's the boy who was abused starting when he was 11 by Peter, the counselor. And, you know, it's much, much later when he's an adult and he finally tells his mom what happened. And she sees the picture of him from that time period. And I think that's just, as a parent, like, that's the part that hit me because, you know,
Well, he said straight away, like, he's like, I told her, and you know what she did? She apologized. She felt guilty. He was nearly surprised that she did. And he was like, well, how would she know? And I'm like, oh, it's not how the parents feel. It's like, I put you in this situation.
But, you know, you and I have talked about this before on this podcast. We've talked about it off the mic. But, like, as parents, we're both parents. Like, you spend so much time trying to make sure your kids are safe and in a good place. And sometimes you're just wrong. Like, sometimes things happen that are out of your control that you couldn't possibly have known about, or, you know, and sometimes you screw up. Like, sometimes you should have known and you didn't. Like, that's your first job as a parent.
Oh, your main
to keep
job.
Your kids
Yeah,
safe.
I know. My heart broke when I heard that. Because it also feels like some of the parents that we were hearing from, like, did call up, did speak to David, like, personally. And he says to them all this shite that's going to happen. And then I think that about Seth's story, what was so hard is, like, he went back numerous summers in a row. And his mum was like, but you always said it was fine. And he's like, I always just wanted it. Like, it's like part of me wanted to go back. I wanted to go back for the good things. I wanted to go back for whatever. And he just kind of hoped that his abuser wasn't there. And I just like...
But that's the thing about, like, I mean, he was 11 years old when this started, and, like, being I mean, he was groomed and he was abused, and I don't know. To pivot to something a little bit lighter, but on the same topic. Have you seen the Camp Krusty episode of The Simpsons? Where Bart and Lisa go to the Krusty the Clown's camp. It's an early episode.
I think I did. Yeah, I have a memory of this.
My compulsive need to not get sucked into this true crime world wholly, and I need to focus on something more from my world.
You focused on
I was thinking about that. I was thinking about The Simpsons. But I mean, there's lots of parallels to this, but like that, I haven't seen that episode in decades, but where Bart and Lisa go off, and like Homer and Marge wouldn't have sent them to that camp if they had any idea what it was. But it was basically basically a work camp. And the sort of marketing of it was all a lie. And that was the same, you know, as here, where David really controlled the narrative. He censored the kids' ability to talk to their parents, which worked great until cell phones just, I think, became too pervasive and the counselors, like, too thinly staffed to really police it. But if we were still living in a cell phone free era, he'd still be getting away with it, probably.
Maybe. Or if the other side of that is, like, you know, in latter years, did kids just become more open to telling their parents? Like, were the conversations kind of more open? Because I feel like that shift has happened over the decades as well, where, like, the relationship and the openness and whatever between kids and their parents, like, it's shifted. So hard to know. Obviously, the mobile phones had an impact too. But yeah, even the awareness, like, one of the parts that I find so hard to get my head into it, I feel like sometimes it feels hard to me to put myself in another decade without, like, thinking of, like, what I know now as a mother, or, like, just a woman in my 30s, or, you know, just in general, and like with all the technology that we have now. And also, I'm obviously someone who loves true crime. So, you know, often my mind is thinking of like the worst case scenario. But, you know, things like the phone calls home in those earlier years before mobile phones were like allowed to be in there, like how a child would be talking to their parents. They wouldn't be able to talk to them very often. But when they would start to tell the parent that something was up, the counselor would be instructed to hang up the phone. It's so hard for me not to think, if I couldn't talk to my child, and when I'm asking them to tell me about the camp and it feels like the conversation's going in a negative direction, the phone is hung up and I can't get back in touch with them. It's really hard for me to think that I wouldn't be like, what is happening here? I want to talk to my child. Do you know?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm really curious how those conversations went, like what those parents were thinking. Like, I can only imagine how incredibly frustrating that was for the kids, but also like for those counselors to be put in that position of basically playing a censor on the kids. And
I mean, the counselors were kids themselves, really, though.
They were kids themselves, and they were also getting mistreated horribly. That was another thing I wanted to ask you about. So I have talked before on this podcast about the boarding school I worked with, and there were definitely some parallels to boarding school life here. And I'm very critical of the school I was at. I had a bad experience as a teacher, but I will say, some of the people that I was friends with, and so we'd eat in the dining hall, you know, alongside the kids. But I would often sit at the table with, there were 2 nurses and a therapist who worked there. And they were some of my then fiance, now wife, closest friends. And the nurses would work in shifts, and they would sit there at the table in the dining hall, and they would pass out meds to the kids. Like, they'd have them, you know, all organized, and it was their job, and they controlled those meds. And they also would sit in the dining hall to watch the kids who they know they need to watch to make sure certain kids were eating, what those kids were eating. Like, mostly I think that they were eating. For certain kids. And the therapist was also there kind of doing her job. I mean, they all lived there, right? They lived on the campus, similar to these counselors. And those 3 people, the 2 nurses and the counselor, were trained, certified adults. And when I heard about this camp basically having, you know, teenagers do that kind of work, including like supposedly being responsible for being a mandatory reporter, which like the med thing alone was baffling. Like, some of those are like controlled substances. Like, these are prescription meds that these kids are on. How do you give that to like a 17-year-old to be responsible for it? Like, that alone seems like that should shut the place down. Like, before you even get into mandatory reporting, I guess. But that continued on into the 2020s.
Well, this is what I'm saying. Like, he was able to get away with things, so he never changed it up. But like, I see what you're saying. Like, it's just. And I think it was the medical professionals not being on site was so frustrating. Like, I know at one point, I can't remember who it was. What was the name of the camper who was on testosterone, who was say that again?
Stellan.
So Stellan, sorry, I forgot his name. Stellan was taking medication and said himself, like, I knew what I needed to take, but I was a teenager and whatever. And I think it was him who said, like, I really feel like the most important person to have been on the camp was actually a nutritionist.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas obviously in this type of camp, when the calories are so low and they're getting shite food, like, do they know anything about it? It's so horrendous. That is obviously one big thing, but the biggest problem I think I had, and there's so many problems, was how David was intentionally placing children who required medical, like, staff on site in harm. So we heard from another camper who had like a heart issue, who really wanted to go to this camp, and was trying to advocate for herself and saying like, my heart is racing, whatever, I need to take a break. And apparently
That's
the fitness
Lily. Yeah.
Lily, and then the fitness instructor is saying like, oh, you can't until you throw up or
Pass out.
Yeah. Without a heart condition. That is cruel. And like, what are you doing to people's psyche here about exercise? Like, this is wild. But
there's so many things there.
Yeah. I know, but from like a medical point of view, it's just, that was insane to me. Like, that was another level of money grabbing that I just couldn't wrap my head around.
And you and I are older than these counselors were, right? These counselors were teenagers or sometimes like in their 20s. But you and I know that this is a version of this is kind of how companies go, right? Like, as they're around for longer, they find different ways to save money. A place like this will go after different demographics that are more lucrative. Like, I've talked before about how the boarding school worked out, but this is true of like colleges all over the country and like a lot of different types of places where like, okay, let's go find let's bring in international students because they pay full tuition. They're not on scholarship, right? Like, let's bring in the students with special needs because we get paid more for them in certain circumstances. Like, but we're not going to provide the services, which is why you get paid more for them, or they might pay a premium because they think they're going to receive the services that they, in some cases, are legally required to receive. But we're just not going to do that. We're going to like hand wave about that. I've been in that position of being. I mean, I worked it was called a learning center, where I was working with kids with different, but highly specialized needs that I was not trained to handle. But, it was so far removed from where the parents lived, we kind of got away with it. I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't good at it, but they just kind of needed a body in the room. And I think like that, and I saw so many parallels here. Although it got to the point where there wasn't even a body in the room. It was just kids watching Wolf of Wall Street. I don't know. Like, it got so wild.
Do you know what was also wild to me is like when we heard about David aging so much and like clearly showing his age, I'm like, what's this money for that you're after? Like, how stressful is it to try and run a camp so badly? Like, he had a lot of money at that point, or at least it felt like he did.
D. There's never enough money.
But like, he's like in his 70s. Like, what does he? Well, I know.
I mean, we've seen so many people in their 80s and 90s who, like the Murdochs or what, like people who just, doesn't matter how old you are, how much money you have, you always just want more. Like, the power and the money and the greed just feeds on itself. And I presume that's what's happening. We don't really know, but like, I presume he just like kept wanting more and more and more.
I feel like we need more Mackenzie Scotts in the world. That's what I feel like. So would you recommend this to a friend?
You ask that so tentatively. I would. I thought this was an incredibly well-made podcast, and I was fascinated by it. I mean, it was heartbreaking, but I thought it was also just really very well done and an unusual story told in an unusual way. I don't feel like we've listened to any like close parallels to this. I found it very unique. Even though we've done scams, we've done abuse stories, we've done things that kind of touch on some of the same crimes, but nothing really quite like this. What about you?
Yeah, I can't say I will tell people about it. I don't feel like it's one that I'm going to, I don't know how to say this. It isn't one of my favorite podcasts we've listened to, but I think they did a very good job at it. That's
interesting. I feel like I'm going to be thinking about this one a lot for a long time. Do you not feel that way? Or do you not want, do you want to put this behind you?
I don't know whether I want to put it behind me. I wonder in 5, 6, however many years it's going to be before my kids are even potentially asking about a sleepaway camp. Will I then think about it? I don't think it's going to leave my mind because I really feel like it's going to be one that I'll mull over. I just don't know if it's the one, I don't know how to say that. I can't imagine myself being like, oh my God, listen to this. You have to listen. And I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel differently. This was one of the. I know we're getting close to the end of the year. Like, to me, this is one that I'm going to think about as one of the most kind of like compelling ones we listened to this year.
That's interesting.
Maybe that's some of my own baggage, like my own like personal experience. I think we probably are having different reactions based on where our kids are at.
I have some reviews.
Okay.
To share. Actually, a lot of reviews. Often, it feels like a newer podcast. It takes a while before reviews come out. But there's a lot going on about this. This one person, Neat Wolverine 3192, says a play on the actual name for a notorious weight loss camp, Shane. I just binged it. Interesting choice of words. And can highly recommend. It's well done with an interweaving of personal stories into the bigger picture. I think that's a good way to describe it, actually.
That's what I was saying. That's what this person. Okay.
You just need to get on
I
to
agree with this. I agree with
Neat Wolverine. Neat Wolverine. Again, like lots of like, it's so good. A few people saying, oh geez, heck, said, I've had to pace myself. My wife was a camp counselor there in 2017. That's so recent. And the series has prompted so many excellent stories from that time. That camp was an utter clown show. And then other people saying, Sharp Sassy. I was like, Sharp Sassy says, I'm all over this. I went to a fat camp and had a very mixed experience. Freedom and restriction intertwined. Thanks for the recommendation. I think also that's the other component that I've really found hard to grapple with. That this idea of a weight loss camp for teenagers was such a thing here. It seems very like foreign to me.
It seems very American to me, I guess. These reviews, though, something I wanted to say. So I mentioned before how I never went to sleepaway camp as a kid. My first really like experience anywhere near this was not until I went to college and did an orientation trip. And I think I have told this story before about how my orientation trip was 4 days in the woods on a through canoe trip in Maine in the middle of the wilderness. And it was really just a group, I don't remember how many, it was like 6 or 8 of us who were like, freshmen, 18-year-olds. And our like guides and experts were like a sophomore and a junior. Like they were a year or two older than us, and our kind of lives were in their hands. What I feel like is important context that was alluded to in the podcast a little bit, but maybe wasn't dwelled on very much, was so many of the principles of how this camp run, not just with weight loss camps, but with just camps, at least in America. I don't know about elsewhere, but like it's very common for kids to go to these types of like a sleepaway camp that is mostly run by people barely older than them or pretty much the same age as them. That, there's lots of camps where the facilities are garbage, that the food is bad, where there are lots of things that are unsafe. The sort of bones of this experience, I don't think are unique. Like, I think there's a lot of things here that just, and that's part of my initial reaction to listening to the first few episodes, like, yeah, this is sort of just like what camp is. Like, there's going to be some really like messed up elements to it, but that's kind of what it's like going away to camp, which again, I can't really speak to, but from all the things that I've heard and learned over the years, yeah, that's kind of, there's camps where you sleep in cabins where you can see through the floors to the ground, where the bathrooms don't work, where the food is barely edible. I think that's important. This camp just took it to another level and took it to some extremes and got obviously dramatically worse.
Yeah, I will say there is this one review. It's quite long, so I'm just going to summarize and like chop pieces out of it. Like it's real long. It's like a whole like this long. Okay, it's
how long is it?
This long. Apprehensive Bag 1884 says, as someone who was a camper for 5 years, so 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 12. The kids you met and the counselors you met are what brought you back year after year. Mix of overweight kids and kids with dysmorphia issues too. I went to the original in New York. The bunks were shit, the food was shit, but the people made it. You saw people grow socially in a summer. Shy kids exploding from their shell. So many good memories surrounding that place. Talks about some of the issues. And then, but the part that I like, a lot of what it says is like saying, yeah, like sometimes there was this, sometimes there was that. But then it says, honestly, many campers listen to this podcast and laugh a lot about it. There is a lot of BS in it and attention grabbing that's false info. However, a lot of truths behind it too. Which
I think that's right. Yeah.
That seems so like fascinating to me because I don't know.
Why?
I don't know. I think it's a fascinating like side of it though. Like obviously we don't hear someone coming on to the podcast saying, "Oh, it was actually great. Like I laugh about it now." Like some of the things you're saying are like true. As you're saying, it's kind of all part of it. Like the food is shit, the whatever shit, blah blah blah.
And like the line between having some of these life-changing formative experiences, whether it's your first kiss or kind of like coming out of your shell, like these sort of like formative, dramatic, exciting experiences when you're like a teenager or like a preteen, the line between that and having your first kiss in an appropriate way and having your first kind of like sexual encounter in an abusive way, it's a thin line.
I know, and that shit happens everywhere. I don't mean to dismiss it, obviously. But I think what this camper is saying, like, absolutely, like, some terrible stuff happened here. But also a lot of people who were at it listen to this podcast and are like, calm down. It wasn't all as bad. Like, I wonder, like, obviously the story about the shit hitting the fan, like, literally a counselor's, like, bedroom full of, like, human feces. The way he was describing it's like there was literally a human turd like floating in my room. Like I was like, oh my god. I think I was cycling home on Monday and I was like laughing just listening to it, like laughing out of it, like that is so horrible, like, but it's just the way he was like there was like a physical human turd and I was just like, oh my god, just the image of it like floating around right beside where you're supposed to sleep. It's so gross. And then the poor like cleaners that come in and get given like gloves and like a mask and I'm like, oh my god.
But it is, yeah,
it's the camp experience. True. Do you know the other random thing that I was thinking? Do you remember like American Pie came out when like 2001 or something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
It feels very much like some of the experiences these kids were having were like, oh, this is what camp is. You know, you're one in American Pie. Talks all about it.
Well, or like Wet Hot American Summer, or, you know, like there's so many camp movies and a lot of these things are tropes in those movies. So
yeah, what you make of the heavyweights comment?
Have
when
you
your
seen
man
Heavyweights?
No, but like when your man gets the wrong one from the, like rents
that is inconceivable to me how that kind of thing happens.
I know, I feel like that couldn't have happened.
I feel like that there's more like that story, the real story is a little different.
Yeah, that definitely felt like the case. Even the fact that they were watching.
Also, those movies don't usually start like that. Like, that's not usually.
Oh my God, I thought the same thing. It's like, wait a second, it just goes straight into it? Like, if it's a full movie, like, that's not where it's going to go.
No, that's a prank. Someone queued that VHS tape up to a certain point.
100%. Yes. Like, something more happened there. Like, they relabeled it or something.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's so funny that you said that. I thought the same thing, but I wasn't going to say it. Yeah, that's so funny.
I'll say it. It's true. We all know it's true. Everybody knows it's true.
But yeah. There was some really good, like, not characters, but like the description of like, there was one like employee who everyone was terrified of. I don't know. I just felt like there was some campers, like some counselors that I could really like picture in my mind. I think they said he was like, was he Eastern European? I don't know. It sounded like some like big muscly like I don't know, trope of a man is just like there and I don't know. It was just very funny. I thought some of it felt comical in the way it was being told.
It did, for sure.
If any of you that are listening would like to share your feedback on our telling and our thoughts about Camp Shame, or how you felt about it, or if you are apprehensive bag 1884 or Neat Wolverine from Reddit and feel like commenting to us and sharing your side of your review, we would love to hear it. While you're there, Neat Wolverine, apprehensive bag and all the rest of you, please leave us 5-star reviews to get the show out there up in front of other people. And don't forget, if you see a maroon shirt walking down the street with our logo on it, go up and say, well done for supporting So Much Crime, So Little Time on Patreon. Well done, you. Thank you so much. Next time, did you enjoy our coverage of the Camp Shame podcast? We got the chance to speak to the host of that podcast, Kelsey Snelling.
On a special episode, we'll share that chat with you as we dive deeper into the story.
That's on the next So Much Crime,
So Little Time. So Much Crime, So Little Time is a production of Mind Glove Media. The executive producer is Paxton Caloriso. Our associate producer is Blythe Ty. Our theme music was composed by Vyacheslav Starostin. If you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to this show on your podcast app. And don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and a review. Even better, tell your friends. To join the discussion, look for us on social media. Check out the show notes for all the links. Thanks for listening.